In this video, you're going to learn how to create this simple, stylized fire shader that's completely customizable. We are only going to use one mesh, hence making it optimizable for any PC. The setup uses a simple node tree. I'm going to take you step by step through my thought process in using masks in layers to create this shader. And by the end of the video, you'll end up with an amazing creation. And if maybe you want to follow along with the project file, you can get access to it at my Gumroad. The necessary links are in the description. So, start up Blender, press A then X to delete everything in the scene. Hover your mouse cursor at the top margin, then left-click. Choose Vertical Split to split your layout screen into two sections. Press Shift A, then add in a plane. Over at the gizmo, click on Z to toggle in top view. Press S, then Y to scale the plane on the Y-axis. Hold Control to be precise on the scaling. Make sure to save your project. We are going to turn the right window to the shader editor. Head on to the render properties and check on ambient occlusion, bloom, and screen space reflection. Now let's add a material to our plane. Delete the principal BSDF. Then head on to the material properties. On the settings, toggle on screen space reflections, set the blend mode to alpha blend, and the shadow mod to none. So from now we are going to be using masks. No, not that kind of mask. In Blender, we are going to be using a combination of nodes, creating a mask in order to build up the shader. Basically, we'll be telling Blender to apply a certain material on a specific part of the mesh. That's the simplest way I can explain, but follow me, I'm going to take you through. So the first mask is going to be used to determine the intensity of the flame, from the source to the furthest part. For this, we are going to be using 4 nodes. So hover your cursor on the shader editor and press Shift plus A and add in a color ramp. Separate XYZ node. And if you have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled, which you should, if you don't, go on to Edit, Preference, Add-on, and type in Wrangler and make sure it's checked. Back to the shader editor, select the separate XYZ node, press Ctrl plus T, that adds in a texture coordinate node, a mapping node, and an image texture. Delete the image texture and connect the vector of the mapping node to the vector of the separate XYZ node. On the side of the plane, press Tab to go into edit mode, U to unwrap the mesh, and select Project from View. Connect the Y section of the separate XYZ to the color ramp, then connect the color ramp to the material output node. Here we can preview the node by changing the view mode to rendered view. Flip the color ramp to switch how the material is displayed. Change the world color down to black. You can change the levers around. As you can see, the white part is more bright than the dark part. Obviously, you can shift around the levers to your liking. Now let's disconnect the shader and work on the next mask. So the next mask is going to be one that determines the oval shape of the flame. It also determines how bright the flame is going to be, moving further from the center. For this, we are going to need 4 textures too. So on the shader editor, press Shift plus A and add in a color ramp, a gradient node set to spherical. Select the gradient node and press Ctrl plus T to add in a mapping and texture coordinate node. Make sure to connect the UV of the texture coordinate node to the vector of the mapping node. Connect the nodes as shown. So if you adjust the Y scale of the mapping node, that determines the length of the flame, and the X determines the breadth of the shader on the mesh. The X location determines the placement of the material on the X axis of the mesh. So adjust the X location and the X scaling to place the material at the center. You can set the X location at around -4.8, the scaling on the X axis at around 9.5, but adjust in according to your preference. You can also adjust the sliders of the color ramp to adjust the length of the flame. So let's work on the last mask. For this one, it's going to determine the vigorous movement of the flame. For this, we are also going to use only 4 nodes. So on the shader editor, press Shift A and add in a color ramp, noise texture, press Ctrl+T to bring in the mapping and texture coordinate nodes. Connect them as follows. Make sure to connect the UV of the texture coordinate node to the vector of the mapping node. Increase the scale on the noise texture, and adjust the black slider of the color ramp for visibility. So if you move the Z location on the mapping node, you'll see the movement occurring. So we are going to use drivers instead of keyframes to animate this movement. So in order to add in a driver, right-click on the Z slider on the mapping node and type in #frame/4. Press play on the timeline. This driver basically means that for every frame, the slider is going to move by 0.25 meters. But now it's only moving randomly. We want the vigorous motion to move from one side to the other. For that, we are going to adjust the scale on the Y-axis on the mapping node. This is going to stretch the black portions of the texture, giving the illusion of speed. You can also adjust the scaling on the X-axis to increase the dark marks. You can adjust it according to personal preference. So that's it for the masks. Now we are going to mix the 3 shaders. For that, you're going to pull out the cord from the lower color ramp and search in Mix Color. Press Shift D to duplicate the shader, set the lower mix color to Multiply, and the top to Color, Dodge. Connect as shown. If you connect the mix color shader, you'll see that the masks are mixed up, but don't worry, we are going to fix that in a few. Adjust the color ramp a bit, then increase the factor of the first mix color. So now let's work on the color of the flame. And for that, we are going to need a color ramp. So Shift A, add in a color ramp and set in any color you like. Add in an emission shader and connect the color of the color ramp to the color of the emission shader. Connect the mix shader to the color ramp, then preview the texture. But wait, fire needs to be transparent on the outer side. For that, press Shift A and search Transparent BSDF. We are going to also add in a mix shader to mix the 2 materials together. Connect the shaders as follows. If we slide the factor of the mix shader well, notice it moves from the transparent shader to the other shaders. But we want the transparent shader to work only on the outer layer. For that, we are going to need a mask. Don't worry, this last one we are only using 1 node. So, add in a color ramp and connect the mix color from the other mask to the color ramp. If you connect the color of the color ramp to the factor of the mix shader, you'll see a bit change taking place. You might have to adjust the sliders of the color ramp a bit. You can add other colors by clicking the plus icon. Make sure on the material property you checked on screen space refraction, blend mode to alpha blend, and the shadow mode to none. You can use Ctrl-Shift-Click to preview a specific node. And with that, you have a procedural stylized shader, created using masks. Make sure you subscribe. With that been said, thanks for watching. See you on the next one.